Welcome back to this edition of the Habs Fan Forum. I am Ben Dankey, and here at the Habs Fan Forum, this is where us fans get to have our voices heard. Alright, today I'm going to be talking about some fantasy hockey tips and tricks, giving you a little bit of a peek into my strategies that I deploy when I draft a fantasy hockey lineup. Before we do that, just a quick word from our sponsor. The Habs Fan Forum is a proud part of the Rocket Sports media team and the Hockey Podcast Network, and we are sponsored by DraftKings, the leader in daily fantasy sports. They make payday every day. They've paid out over $7 billion across all sports and all users. And you can get in on the action too by downloading the DraftKings app and using the promo code THPN to win some prizes. Alright, today I'm going to be going into fantasy hockey in general. You might remember I did a previous segment on fantasy hockey players on the Montreal Canadiens. Check back on the channel to check that out. That gives you a little breakdown of how I actually see the Habs players performing throughout the year. In this one, I'm going into strategies, my draft strategies, what I look for, how I kind of make my picks, and some general round by round analysis. Alright, before I reveal everything, this is now the time that if you are in any of my fantasy hockey leagues, please turn the channel off. I can't be telling you all my secrets. Yep, I'll wait. Okay, now that they're hopefully gone, just a quick ground rule. Obviously, keeper leagues are a whole new beast in their own. I'm not doing this on a keeper league. It's going to be a standard league, and we're going to use standard scoring. All right, in the top 3 rounds, you really have to go for reliable superstars. I go for your top scorers. Like, don't whiff on it. If you have a chance to get a McDavid, a Matthews, a McKinnon, like a Draisaitl, you're making those picks all the time. Like, they're reliable, and they're going to put up points. A couple of things here. I typically avoid players who are injured. In the first couple of rounds, you need to have your stars there. So, guys like Jack Eichel, who's ranked in the 9th position this year, don't get me wrong, I think he could very well play up to that potential or higher, and he is a first-round talent. However, you pick one below him, you have like a Mikko Rantanen right there, who might give you the same value, but doesn't have that giant asterisk. I avoid the asterisks in my top 2 rounds, even maybe my top 3. Questionable. I also typically don't go for goalies in the top 2 rounds. If there's like a superstar goalie like Vasilevsky who's dropped to like a 2nd round and I'm a late round pick, I might scoop him up. But typically, I want to have 2 to 3 high-performing skaters first. And finally, in the top rounds, I don't really go for a lot of defensemen. You have to be like an Erik Karlsson back in 2017, 2016 for me to go for a defenseman in those top couple rounds. Usually, I'm getting them in value later. All right, so now that we go into some later rounds, kind of rounds 4 to 8, this is where a couple things. I love high goalie depth. I want value goalies. Depending on how your league's drafting, you might go up or down on how you're drafting your goalies here. Of course, if you see a spur of goalies going, you get a little nervous. But typically, I like to have 2 stud goalies. And I know it's hard to get, and you're usually giving up a really high-performing forward to get that second goalie. But I think it pays off. Most leagues overvalue goalies. So I'll go for 2 top-tier goalies in these kind of middle rounds. Kind of really help balance out my forwards and my goalies first. I'll also try to find guys who might have been injured, like a Jack Eichel, who, let's be real here, he's not dropping to a 5th round. But in previous years, I've found guys like Evgeny Malkin in the 3rd or 4th round. I found guys who dropped down because of an injury that someone had some recency bias towards. Something that is just like a nagging injury, or like you've done some research and it's not something that really worries you. You might get some really good value here. I won't do it in the top 3 rounds, but I might do it in these mid rounds. Finally, in these mid rounds, I might reach on some really, really intriguing prospects. Like, I'm talking guys who are about to blow up. They might get ranked a little bit lower based on how like Yahoo or your league places value on vets and guys who performed the year before. But like, I remember I got Alex DeBrincat in like one of his early years in like a really late round, and he was a stud. And you look for those players who you think are going to have that breakout performance, and you might be grabbing them a couple rounds too early. The name of the game is always not to overpay, but you have that chance to grab a stud who you think is going to perform even higher than where you picked them. All right, as you get into later rounds, make sure you're rounding out your team, drafting by position so you don't get stuck with like no left wingers or no right wingers. Center position's always the deepest. You're going to have really good centermen go late, so I typically try to get those wingers filled before center because there's really some mid-round guys who can fill out that center depth. I typically actually wait on defensemen. I know defensemen go fast sometimes, but I still... there's not a huge difference between the 25th defenseman and the 35th defenseman. So I'll usually wait a little bit on there. And as I alluded to earlier, I really put an emphasis on goalies. I like to have my 2 studs, but I also like to have 3 to 4 goalies in total. Just in case one goes down, you're not losing your league and trying to go on the waiver wire and find some third string backup goalie. So I'll typically try to find a sleeper or a nice reliable option. The more starters you can have, the better. Obviously, having 2 studs is my original strategy. Also, do not forget about the plus-minus category if it's in your league. Sometimes you'll have 2 players who are very close. One of them's like a minus 25, one of them's not. Yeah, go for the one who's not. And when it comes to drafting for like subcategories like PIMS and fighting and that, it's really hard to build a strategy around those. You can do it, and I've seen people win with that strategy. And if you draft a player who has both, even better. I typically go to win my main categories and pick players who are going to help me win those categories. Wherever I'm going after goals, assists, etc. Try to win the categories you're strong in. And then if you have the PIMs in the fighting and all that kind of stuff to kind of eat in those and shots and whatever your league does, they might fill in as well. But I go after the main categories first. And finally, don't be afraid in those late rounds to pick some kind of like out there picks, some young players, some rookies, some complete like sleepers that you have on your board. Have a list of guys who you're willing to reach for and who you're willing to wait on, and see if you can grab a couple of those exciting ones in the end. Don't worry about those guys who you might just get on the waiver wire anyways. They're fringe players on your roster. Go for something a little more exciting in those late rounds. All right, that's it for this episode of the Habs Fan Forum. There was a ton of tips in there, I know, so I hope it helps you draft your fantasy team and go to the championship. Now, if you liked the video, just like down below, please share, tell your friends, and hit that subscribe button for more awesome content. Of course, you can follow all Habs for the best Montreal Canadiens coverage. Thanks again for watching. I'm Ben Danke, and of course, woo! Go Habs, go!